The final class in the Wrath of the Lich King series is here. Have I saved the best for last, perhaps? Well, I'm sure in the eyes of some people it will be. The warrior since the days of vanilla has proven to be a powerhouse of a class, having well surpassed expectations for DPS and TBC, whilst remaining a strong tanking class throughout its life so far. Moving over to Northrend, the warrior is about to unlock some of its most defining talents ever, as well as being a strong contender for a certain legendary weapon late into the expansion. With 3 specializations to cover and a bunch of talking points for all areas of content, let's get into it and take a look at the warrior in Wrath. Before we go on, I want to do a quick word from today's video sponsor, Infinite Galaxy. Infinite Galaxy is a sci-fi based interstellar game on an epic scale. Set in galactic year 4649, Infinite Galaxy takes place after a long-standing war between the Old Federation and the Empire. Undertake spacebound missions in Ace Strike. This mode has fast-paced missions aimed to hone your skills against rogue units across a range of breathtaking environments. Control your fleet via a huge range of options and choices from the interface at the command center. Outfit and customize your ships from a huge range of options in both ship types, appearances, their performance, and more. Each flagship in the game has its own unique skills, name, and can be further altered to choose the strongest combination possible. Strengthen up your port by appointing crew members to fit your strategic requirements, building on your strengths and shoring up your weaknesses. You can engage in PvP conflicts with other players controlling their own units across a vast array of different maps and PvP events. Finally, customize your chief officer to create a unique look specific to your required dimensions. If you're a sci-fi lover and wanted to try something new, why not give Infinite Galaxy a go? Download Infinite Galaxy through my link below for free and get a new player starter gift worth $60 to begin your journey. Many thanks to Infinite Galaxy for the sponsor. Let's talk WoW. Starting as we do with the basics, so let's look at the baseline changes in the warrior's spellbook. Battle Stance has now had a passive 10% armor pen for all attacks added onto it, which is going to add up quite nicely. All of the big warrior 30-minute cooldowns have been moved down to 5 minutes instead, those being Retaliation, Recklessness, and Shield Wall. Instead, they now each last 12 seconds, no longer share a cooldown between each other, and you can only have one of them active at once. As for the changes in the arms tree, Retaliation now counterattacks a maximum of 20 times instead of 30. Thunderclap has had its target cap removed, making warriors way better at AoE tanking than they've ever been before. A number of other talents we can go over later also help this out a lot. Rend is no longer completely useless for PvE, it now scales its damage with your weapon, and new ranks will also hit harder against high health targets. More of a change that arms warriors care about, as we'll see in the talents later. New to the arms tree is Heroic Throw, instantly throwing your weapon at the target and causing high threat. This exists so warriors don't have to range pull with a bow anymore. Warriors also get Shattering Throw that applies a 20% armor reduction debuff on their target for 10 seconds. Also in PvP, Shattering Throw will remove immunities such as Ice Block or Paladin's Divine Shield. In the Fury tree, Berserker Stance now increases critical strike chance by 3% but increases all damage taken by 5%. Recklessness gets, well, completely gutted. Seriously, rip this ability. It now makes your next 3 abilities crit instead of everything critting for its duration. You also take 20% more damage whilst it's active. Bonus rage damage from Execute now gets capped at 30, so you won't be hitting quite as hard as it does at the moment. New to Fury is Enraged Regeneration, a new defensive on a 3-minute cooldown. Consume an Enrage effect, healing 30% of your max health over 10 seconds. And in Wrath, it's not hard to always have an Enrage active either, so it's a decent help to personal survivability. Over in Protection, Defensive Stance now reduces damage taken by 10%, reduces damage caused by 5%, and generates extra threat. Thunder Armor is changed to reduce a percentage instead of a flat amount of the target's armor, capping out at 20%, and Taunt now has a 30-yard range, so you don't have to be literally on top of something for it to work. Shield Slam has also become a baseline ability for the warrior, and Shield Block has been updated, going from a 5-second cooldown that gives a 75% chance to block one attack to now being a 1-minute cooldown that increases chance to block and block value by 100% for 10 seconds. And finally, Shield Wall has changed to be a 60% damage reduction on a 5-minute cooldown. I'd say not a huge volume of things have changed for the baseline kit of the warrior, but the talents are where we're going to see how things really evolve for them. So then, similar to TBC, there will be 2 DPS specializations that raiding warriors will be looking at, those being Arms and Fury. As per tradition, Arms is the big two-handed wielding warrior that focuses on less attacks but ones that do more damage. There's also quite a few talent changes throughout the tree, but a number of them are just small numerical adjustments and otherwise do the same thing as TBC, so I want to focus on the new stuff. Taste for Blood is a reason to always keep Rend up. Overpower procs are going to add a nice bit of extra damage into your rotation. Sweeping Strikes has moved back over from Fury into Arms again, where it makes a bit more sense, I think. The time of the sword spec is finally over. Two things have happened to end its reign as the go-to weapon specialization since day one of vanilla. First of all, Wind Fury Totem is RIP and it gives melee haste now instead of bonus attacks, so just less chance to proc it in general. And when it does proc, as you can see on the tooltip, it's been given an internal cooldown, so it's nowhere near as strong as it used to be. Pole-like specialization is preferred instead to give you extra crit. Trauma is another new talent, increasing the potency of bleeds on the target for a minute. This will either be you as the Arms warrior applying this or a feral druid. Either way, there's several classes that care about bleed damage now, so this is a nice bonus. Strength of Arms is just a bunch of stats for you. Juggernaut is another new talent that makes charge usable in combat, although increasing its cooldown by 5 seconds. I think that's a pretty good trade-off though. Unrelenting Assault is a huge talent for all areas of content. For Arms in a PvE context, it's a shorter cooldown and more damage on overpower. Blood Frenzy increases your attack speed a little bit and adds a 4% physical debuff to your targets. A second great bit of utility for the Arms warrior here. A bit further down the tree, Sudden Death gives Arms another proc, a 9% chance on melee to be able to use Execute whatever the target's health is at. Towards the bottom of the tree, Wrecking Crew enrages you, giving 10% more damage. And your final talent has to be one of the most fun abilities Blizzard have ever come up with. What if we took Whirlwind and just made it so you spammed it for like 6 seconds and became immune to everything? Well, ladies and gentlemen, they made it and they call it Blade Storm. On a super short 1-minute cooldown, become a Whirlwind of Steel, dealing huge AoE damage to nearby targets. It procs your bleeds and all your debuffs, it enrages you, and it leaves you with basically a full rage bar when you come out of it. Big fan of this ability, always been really fun. Arms uses glyphs such as Mortal Strike for some more damage, Rend for the extra duration, and of course Blade Storm, because we want to be using more Blade Storms. But warriors tend to not stay Arms forever, because as the inevitability of gear progression happens, more crit and armor penetration becomes available, and they will turn into late game scaling machines, and eventually Fury will take over as the go-to warrior spec. Again, in this talent tree there's quite a few bits to go over. Armored to the Teeth is a nice extra bit of attack power that scales up as your gear does. Enrage in the Fury tree changes a little bit. It's now a 30% proc off any damaging attack instead of you having to be crit. This means Fury warriors have two reasons to stand in fire now: A, rage generation, and B, trying to proc this new enrage. Death Wish has been moved back over to the Fury tree from Arms again. Intensify Rage is new, reducing the cooldown of several of your core abilities. Furious Attacks has been added. It's not really taken anywhere. It's the Fury version of Mortal Strike, but it kinda sucks. More of a PvP edition, but Fury just doesn't match up to Arms at all in that regard. Rampage has changed to be 5% crit for your entire raid now. Take it if you need it. A feral druid will probably be taking this buff though. Blood Surge gives Fury a proc to track as well, giving several of your attacks a chance to make your next slam instant cast. Heroic Fury is also new, instantly removing immobilizing effects and refreshing the cooldown on intercept. And no, warriors don't get Heroic Leap in Wrath. I thought this talent was Heroic Leap too when I saw the icon. That doesn't happen till Kata. Towards the end of the tree, Unending Fury is just your good old do a bit more damage on these abilities kind of talent. And then finally we have another absolute classic of a talent. The reason Fury stands out when you're sitting there on your mount in the capital city: Titan's Grip. It gives a 10% damage penalty, however you can now equip two two-handed weapons, which well surpasses this limitation. Absolutely iconic end of talent tree ability. It just feels good to swing around two huge weapons, and it also, as another little bonus you may not think of, gives Fury warriors really high health pulls from wielding two two-handers, which offsets taking a little more damage whilst in Berserker stance. Fury uses glyphs such as Heroic Strike for more rage gains, Whirlwind to reduce the cooldown, and where it's relevant, Cleaving is also a huge bonus. The final tree to break down in PvE content is the beefy tank boys on the front line, none other than the Protection Warrior. Improved Thunderclap has been moved over from the Arms tree and been given a nice bit of extra damage. This is going to be your bread and butter AoE threat generator. Incite is a new talent and is a bit optional for your extra threat gains. Fury may also consider going into protection later in the game to pick this up as well. Shield Mastery increases your block value and decreases the cooldown on shield block down to 40 seconds. Improved Revenge is a great dungeon, leveling, or just generally I need to cleave talent. Improved Spell Reflect now gives 2 allies a similar buff for the same period of time. Improved Disciplines reduces the cooldown on all your big 5-minute abilities like Shield Wall and so on by 60 seconds. Concussive Blow now deals damage scaling with your attack power and has its cooldown lowered to 30 seconds. Gag Order is another new talent giving Shield Bash and Heroic Throw a 3-second silence. Vigilance is your first new active ability. Watch over an ally, reducing damage they take by a flat 3% and transferring 10% of all threat they cause to you. On top of this, if they're hit directly, your taunt cooldown resets. Mainly good for the extra threat, but the other bonuses are okay as well. Improved defensive stance now makes it so when you block, you enrage, dealing 10% bonus damage. Safeguard is an interesting niche talent, making the target take 30% reduced damage for 6 seconds. Critical Block is yet another new addition, giving you a 60% chance to block double and adding some more damage on Shield Slam. Warbringer is an amazing bit of utility, making all of your warrior gap closers usable in combat as well as in any stance. This is what makes Prot Warriors a super mobile tank that always has a way to close the gap. Damage Shield just does damage when you block. Sword and Board adds some more damage to your main abilities and has a chance to reset the cooldown on Shield Slam whilst also making it free. Really good proc here for the damage. Your final talent is a great mix of CC and damage. Shockwave. On a really short 20-second cooldown, deal some damage that scales with your attack power and stun all enemies in front of you for 4 seconds. Really powerful on small, frequent chain pulls or getting that snap AoE threat better than any other tank can do without external help. Protection warriors use glyphs such as Taunt, so Taunt works, as well as a Last Stand and Shield Wall for a few more consistent cooldown options. So with all that said, how do we reckon warriors are going to perform in PvE this expansion? Well, this is gonna have to be a bold prediction because I can absolutely say warriors totally outperformed expectations in TBC. It was very much expected they wouldn't be coming online damage-wise until tier 6, where they begin to gain access to loads of armor penetration gear. In reality, as soon as you had your Dragon Strike and some tier 5 gear, Fury was already very capable of topping DPS. Well, as long as you gave it a proper group, but that's how TBC raiding is in general. And wouldn't you know, for Wrath of the Lich King, it's supposed to be the exact same script. Play arms early, be middling on the DPS, providing more of a utility role. Tier 7 Fury is expected to be way low down on the damage meters, exceptions perhaps on a few fights where you can cleave a lot, but generally speaking. And not till Trial of the Crusader will Fury really start to consistently rise up the ranks. And by ICC at the end of the expansion with your armor pen cap, Fury will be capable of putting out some of the best DPS in the entire game. Will the predictions be right this time? Maybe. What I will say is if the main thing that matters to you in raids is how high you are on the meters, I don't see why for tier 7 at least you wouldn't pick something like a Death Knight, a Rogue or a Warlock, and then swap main later once it's more of a sure thing. Still, DPS Warrior has surprised us before and only time will truly tell. And hey, maybe you get to play the underdog 2 expansions in a row and be strong early and incredible late. Because even though the game's old, even though many people have played it on their own servers time and time again, it's never been re-released by Blizzard. Things can change, things can be discovered. Give it a good old grain of salt. As for protection, it also gets a bad reputation in Wrath of the Lich King. It's sort of similar to Feral Tanks, however, because I can tell you people will clear all of the content with Prot Warriors. It's just the other tanks have that little bit more than it. For PvE content, protection excels in dungeons with their AoE threat. Thunderclap gets its target cap removed, Shockwave, Revenge, and so much more. They can do everything. In raiding content, now that crushing blows are no longer relevant, their ability to always mitigate these attacks hasn't really been replaced by something which is equally as valuable. They have strong cooldowns, but other tanks have strong cooldowns. And whilst they mitigate physical attacks well, Wrath of the Lich King has loads of magic damage in raids too, leaving protection in a rather strange position. Nevertheless, they are a tank with a ton of mobility, AoE, damage, and good cooldowns. Though they may not be on top, they're certainly going to be a fun pick. So let's move on to PvP then. The warrior has always been a top tier clear pick here, and Wrath the Lich King will be no exception. Notably, Arms Warrior will find itself as being part of a lot of the strongest comps in the game. A quick mention that late game in Wrath, when you get tons of armor penetration, you can play protection in PvP. It's way more memey and actually surprisingly squishy for a tank, but those shield slam procs from sword and board can near one-shot people. It's fun and worth a go eventually, but for this I want to focus on the specialization that you should expect to see from warriors in Wrath: arms. Talent-wise, I'm going to go over the ones that I missed for PvE. Iron Will reduces the duration of stuns and charms on you by a decent amount. Weapon Mastery, which used to be in the Fury tree, has moved over to arms, reducing the chance you're dodged as well as the duration of disarms by 50%. Improved Hamstring is of course taken, giving a chance to root targets for 5 seconds. Second Wind is another powerful returning talent from TBC, restoring loads of health and rage when stunned or rooted. Unrelenting Assault perhaps shows its true power in PvP content. This is one of those talents which I'm not really sure how it went live like this, but if you use Overpower on a target that's casting, they deal 50% reduced damage and healing for 6 seconds. And yes, it stacks with Mortal Strike, as a percentage at least, in that if a target has both effects active at once, it will render healing 75% less effective, which is yeah, that's a big number. This is why Arms Warrior damage is kind of unhealable. Of course, Bladestorm at the bottom of the tree is your counter to CC effects across the board, and it can even be used as an escape if you really need it to. It's a super versatile ability. You can get disarmed out of it though, and a lot of classes have disarms now in Wrath. Even Marksman Hunters and Shadow Priests have disarms. Over in the Fury tree are 2 returning talents from TBC in Blood Craze, restoring 6% of total health over 6 seconds after being crit, and Piercing Howl as a good utility AoE slow. On top of the insane pressure warriors can put out with Mortal Strike and Unrelenting Assault, they can charge in combat, they can cleave your entire team with sweeping strikes, they have a disarm and AoE fear, and you will see just how tanky they get. For real, between Blood Craze, Second Wind and Enrage Regeneration, they heal way more than you would expect by just kind of existing. Warriors, as per usual, expected to need a little bit more gear to get going. In fact, I think casters are kind of going to be bullying them early game when they have low resilience, but a bit later on in this expansion, Arms is an absolute monster PvP specialization. Arms in PvP uses glyphs pretty similar to PvE actually, in Bladestorm for the reduced cooldown, Mortal Strike for more damage, and Hamstring, which is also great when it works together with the talent, giving you a 25% chance to root. Let's wrap it up on some of the tier sets then. Tier 7, the Dreadnought Battle Gear. DPS wise, the 2 set gives Salam 10% damage, which is pretty minor in that it's a filler ability for Arms and a proc for Fury. The 4 set gives your bleeds a 10% chance to make your next ability cost 5 less rage. For tanks, the 2 set adds 10% more damage on Shield Slam, and the 4 set increases the duration of Shield Wall by 3 seconds. The 2 set's nice, extra damage, extra threat, not much to add on top of that. As for the 4 set, I mean, Blizzard said they're going to be buffing Naxxramas, but I'm not sure this is really going to be relevant. Next up, tier 8, the Siege Breaker Battle Gear from Ulduar. The 2 set Salam and Heroic Strike crits have a 40% chance to give you 150 haste for 5 seconds. Again, depends on how much rage you have to spend on these filler abilities really. Even then, it's less than 5% haste for 5 seconds. It just seems about okay. The 4 set is 10% more crit chance for Mortal Strike and Bloodthirst. Not very exciting, more damage, very cool. For tanks, the 2 set increases the crit chance of Devastate by 10%. Blizzard really enjoy giving proc warriors more damage this expansion. The 4 set makes a bit more sense. Shield Block also makes you take 20% less magic damage for the duration. Not half bad, but you want a cooldown like this to be used on melee attacks really. Tier 9 is Rin or Hellscream's Battle Gear from Trial of the Crusader. DPS 2 set Zerker Stance gives 2% more crit, that's 5% passive total, and Battle Stance gives 6% more armor pen, so 16% total. Better than it looks because it's a passive bonus which is going to affect absolutely everything you do. The 4 set increases the crit chance of Salam and Heroic Strike. By this point in time, we should really start to see warriors scale up, and these will go a long way to help that. For tanks, the cooldown on Taunt is reduced by 2 seconds on the 2 set, as well as a bit more damage on Devastate. The 4 set reduces the cooldown on Shield Block by 10 seconds. That'll mean it's up every 30 seconds when talented, which is actually pretty good. And now for the big boy tier, the I don't know how you say it, Lord's Battle Gear from ICC. DPS 2 set, when Deep Wounds does damage, you have a 3% chance to gain a massive 16% attack power for 10 seconds. Amazing scaling potential on AoE fights, or where you can cheese a bit of cleave, stacks up well with cooldowns, even if it's a bit RNG heavy. DPS 4 set means your proc effects from your rotation will instead have 2 stacks, fire off a bit faster, and you have more time to weave them into your rotation. Super cool set bonuses here for the DPS warriors, no wonder they get so good by ICC. Finally, protection, 2 set, shield slam and shockwave get 20% more damage. Okay Blizzard, you want to give tanks damage, don't you? At least you can give them a good amount like this. The 4 set blood rage no longer costs health, instead makes you absorb damage equal to 20% of your max health. Another powerful defensive cooldown to add into your kit here, not half bad either. So now we've had a little look over the warrior in PvE, PvP, tier sets and more. Can we really give a good answer as to what to expect from this class in Wrath of the Lich King Classic? It'll be one to watch for sure. I'm interested to see whether fan servers got it right this time. It's full on expected for warriors to be way down the DPS meters for a good while early game, but again they are well known to scale like absolute machines and should be a safe bet to be high on the DPS meters by late game. Protection also gets a bit of a bad reputation as mentioned earlier. I think a good bit of it is just protection paladins are unreasonably good this expansion, so it's kind of hard to justify bringing another main tank unless you have somebody who's dead set on playing prot warrior. In PvP, again expected to be a slow starter and gear dependent, but another late game force to be reckoned with, alongside an even better toolkit for PvP than they already have in TBC. You know, Wrath of the Lich King was really the era of a class being flavor of the month. We don't really have that in Classic anymore, now we only have one balance patch. Maybe warriors in Wrath will be the tipping point where people do start choosing to play them as we get later on into the expansion. Either way, warriors are just a fun class to play. Even if you're not topping the DPS or the best tank early, you're playing that a long game. It's only a matter of time before you start hitting the big numbers. Oh, and there's this two-handed weapon too called Shadowmourne. I don't know, I heard it's pretty good for PvE and PvP. That might be something you want to think about long term as well. Those are my impressions on the warrior though. Let me know what you thought, whether you tried one back in the day or whether this will be your first spin with Wrath warriors. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you all in the next one very soon.